Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 Rick Steves Festival of Tours. My name is Emily Burks, and I am delighted to be your moderator this evening as we explore the exciting cities, charming backdoor towns, and stunning natural beauty that makes up our 6 Central and Eastern Europe tours. But before we get started and hit the road in our trusty tour bus, please allow me a few introductory announcements. We are now officially on night 8 of our 9-night travel festival. Tonight, the focus is Central and Eastern Europe tours. And tomorrow, we are back for the grand finale. Every year, we take 30,000 travelers with us on the road to Europe. And at the end of their tours, we ask them what their favorite, most memorable moment was or their wow moment. And we have collected those favorites from our tour members. So we are so excited to share them with you tomorrow night. Also tomorrow night, we are announcing the winners of our city tour giveaway. To celebrate the launch of our 2026 tours, we are giving away 2 Rick Steves city tours to 2 lucky viewers who will get the chance to join us in Paris, Istanbul, Rome, or London for free. And it is not too late to enter. You can do so by using the link in the chat widget and enter to win. But please note that only residents of the US are able to participate. And unfortunately, due to local laws beyond our control, our friends in New York, Rhode Island, Puerto Rico, and Florida are unable to participate. And while there can only be 2 city tour giveaway winners, anyone can take advantage of our early booking discount. From now until July 7th, we are offering $100 off per traveler on all 2026 tour bookings. This discount is automatically applied at checkout. And if you cannot wait to get to Europe with us until 2026, I have good news for you. We have a number of 2025 tours on sale right now. There should be a link to our tours on sale in the chat widget as well. So I highly recommend perusing those if you are itching to travel. And if you have already started shopping for our tours, you may have noticed that we have many, many itineraries, 46 to be exact, that span all across Europe. But tonight we are focusing on one region in particular, and that is Central and Eastern Europe. So on that note, please join me in welcoming our 2 guides for the evening, Cameron Hewitt and Marijan Krišković.
Hi there, Emily.
Hi there.
Hello.
Welcome.
And hello to you, Marijan. How are you today?
Well, thank you.
And you're
Thanks for
calling
having
in,
me.
I recall so it's, first of all, it's 3 o'clock in the morning where you are, so thank you for coming. And tell us where you are calling in from.
Oh, I'm currently on Rob Island, in the northern northern parts of the Croatian Adriatic coast. So enjoying the last sail of the May vacation with my daughter.
Very good. Well, enjoy. And it is May Day, isn't it? So happy Labor Day. Happy May
Indeed.
Day. Europe is celebrating this weekend.
Wonderful. Well, Marijan, I'm so glad to hear you are getting to spend some time at the beach, and we are in excellent hands with you too. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and I will see you during the Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily, and thanks to all of you for joining us on this Thursday evening to hear about the Rick Steves Central and Eastern European tours. I'm Cameron Hewitt. I've got Marijan Krišković with me from Croatia, and we're excited to tell you about these tours. I'm going to start off by just telling you a little bit about the region, and then the second part of the talk, the main part of the talk, Marijan's going to be the tour guide, and he'll tell us a little bit more depth, some of the things that he thinks are really special about Central and Eastern Europe. And then closer to the end, I'll just quickly run through all of the itineraries that cover this region so you can kind of picture how all the bits and pieces we've been talking about fit together into our various itineraries with Marijan's help to kind of explain what's what. So I'm going to start my slideshow and just give us a little kind of introduction to this region, and then we're going to get into Marijan's commentary. But first, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what you can expect if you're traveling to Central and Eastern Europe. And boy, I've been working with Rick Steves for 25 years. And Rick is very passionate about this region, but there's only one Rick, and so he only gets to spend so much time in these countries. And I'm very honored that several years ago, He appreciated my deep, deep passion for these countries. So he kind of trusts me to be sort of the in-house expert in Central and Eastern Europe. I've led all of these tours. I get to be great friends with people like Marijan Krišković and all of our other great guides. I'm also the co-author of our guidebook. So I really know these countries well, and I'm so excited to tell you about them tonight. I think this is sort of the great underrated, lesser known, beautiful, beautiful part of Europe that you should really think about traveling to if it hasn't been on your radar yet. I'm going to give you a quick taste of what I love about Central and Eastern Europe before we get into more details. And I would say the hallmark for me of this area is diversity. We're talking about a huge region. There's geographical diversity, cultural diversity, and so forth. So let me just give you a taste of what you'll find there. The first thing that might surprise you, though, if you think about Eastern Europe, you might have some old-fashioned ideas about the old communist times and so forth, and imagine that it's kind of a dreary, intimidating place. Well, I've been traveling in this region for more than 25 years, and I got to tell you, this part of Europe has become totally rejuvenated. Things have been rebuilt, things have been polished. It's come an incredibly long way in that time, and these are just really modern, fully European countries that have a lot of vitality and modernity. For example, this is a famous thermal bath complex in Budapest. I took this picture maybe 20 years ago, and I went back a few years later, and the same place looked like this. And I love to show this contrast because that really indicates how much this region has changed recently. And boy, these countries are really ready for prime time from a tourism perspective, that's for sure. We're talking about some of the great cities of Europe. We're talking about places like Prague, Krakow in Poland, Budapest in Hungary. Lots of beautiful, charming small towns as well, and lots of great urban landscapes and wonderful cities that maybe you've never heard of, and then you go there and say, this place is amazing. This is Gdansk on the northern coast of Poland. Not a place a lot of Americans have been to, but when you do go, you'll be blown away by it. Unique experiences in Eastern Central Europe. You've got simmering in the thermal baths of Hungary, for example. You can tour the largest brick castle on the planet at Malbork in Poland on our Poland tour. You can hike around the walls of Dubrovnik, one of the best preserved medieval walled cities anywhere. There's also incredible natural diversity, beautiful natural wonders in this area. You've got the soaring Alps up in Slovenia. You've got the shimmering coastline where Marijan is right now, down in Croatia, and everything in between. This is a place with some incredible natural wonders to see. Lots of layers of history in this region. You've got Roman ruins. You've got beautiful Venetian-style churches. You've got sleepy, tranquil cloisters. You've got beautiful, charming Baroque-style towns. You've got Hanseatic cities that look more like maybe Amsterdam or something you'd expect to find in the Low Countries. Also, a lot of cultural diversity. I mentioned earlier, lots of different sub-regions of this area. For example, you'll see everything from Catholic church steeples all the way to Muslim minarets in Bosnia. A tremendous amount of diversity here. Old traditional culture as well as super modern culture. For me, though, the best part about all these years I've traveled in these countries are the wonderful people that you get to meet. I find this is a part of Europe where it's especially easy to connect with local people. There's definitely some tourism here, but most of these places are not over touristed, right? And so I find that a lot of people are a little more open, a little more eager to connect with people from far away. Maybe they're kind of flattered that you've come to their country because they know that not as many Americans come to some of these places. We also have some wonderful tour guides from this part of the world that you'll get to travel with if you take some of our tours. Tina Hiti in Slovenia, B. Mikomas, who's in Poland. You've got Amir from Bosnia. You've got Etelka from Hungary. You've got Agnieszka also from Poland. Just a wonderful collection of guides that we get to work with on these tours. And one of my favorite guides, somebody I've known for a very long time, actually, Marijan, I was thinking, you and I met on the first ever Eastern Europe tour. When we called it the Eastern Europe tour, you were our local guide in Marijan. I was the assistant guide on that tour in Ljubljana. You were our local guide for our town walk there. So we've been working together for 24, 23 years. So thank you for joining us here tonight. We're really excited to have your perspective.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm just going to go back into the slideshow, and Marijan and I were kind of brainstorming what are some of the topics that would make this place special? What are some of the things that make Central and Eastern Europe distinct? Before we do that, though, let's talk about that label, Central and Eastern Europe. This has kind of shifted in recent years. We used to just call this Eastern Europe. Now we call it Central Europe. We're really talking about these countries that are kind of just over what used to be the Iron Curtain, right? Just east of what used to be, East Germany and so forth. Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia. So Marijan, as someone from this part of the world, let's just get started. Tell us a little bit about how you envision this region as a whole?
Well, the whole division, East and Western Europe, made certainly more sense in the days of the Cold War, but it's been a while. So since then, there's a whole new generation that grew up and relates to those times in the same way they would to Julius Caesar and Napoleon as they read about it from history books. So people from this area prefer to think of this area as Central Europe. Because the East-West Cold War division was basically just a blimp in its much longer and rich history. So if you travel to the Czech Republic, for instance, and refer to it as Eastern Europe, you might have locals cringing and correcting you that it's actually Central Europe. People from this area would usually think of Eastern Europe as areas much further east, as almost half of the European continent is in Russia, places like Ukraine, Belarus, and so forth. So during the Cold War period, after World War II, a lot of these places were detached in their natural links to the West, and I guess this makes a point that it's back to where it's always been, essentially.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, all of these countries except Bosnia are all part of the European Union. Some of them are using the euro currency. Your country, Slovenia, uses the euro currency. Most of them are in the Schengen zone, open borders, so they are fully integrated with Europe these days. Yeah,
right.
just to emphasize what Marijan was saying, if you're still visualizing this as Eastern Europe, you can hear that for local people this is quite important. And we've shifted our terminology in the last few years at Rick Steves Europe. If you draw a line right through the middle of Europe, look right there, Prague is just right near the very center of Europe, if you're skeptical about whether it's Central Europe. In fact, Prague is farther west than places like Vienna and Rome, believe it or not. So these are the countries that we're talking about, sort of the just barely east of center of Europe. We even changed the title of our guidebook and our tours just a few years ago from Eastern Europe to Central Europe, because Rick and I kept hearing this feedback from locals that, hey, let's use the right term here. So that just if you're curious where that comes from, that's the background there. So let's dig in now, Marijan, to what's unique and distinctive and special about this region. We were brainstorming, and one of the first things I thought of is just the cities are very elegant. I think of it as a Habsburg elegance, but it's not just Habsburg. Tell us a little bit about that aspect of this region.
Indeed, a lot of these countries connect culturally together. They're all very distinct and different, but there's a strong connection, particularly due to the Habsburg dynasty that you mentioned. The once movers and shakers of Europe, that was the first European dynasty that had the empire where the sun never set, and they called this region their home. So many of the bigger cities like Prague in this picture, Vienna, Budapest, and so on, are great examples of that imperial grandeur that were the center of things during the centuries that this dynasty ruled not just this part of Europe, but a much bigger territory. And the opulence and the culture that came with it is still evident today in every step you take in these places.
Yeah, very nice. And I always associate, this is Budapest, for example, one of the co-capitals of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, of course. So this is a place where you really feel that Habsburg heritage. Is it fair to say?
Yes, exactly. Budapest was named the second capital only in the mid-1800s. So at a time when there was a lot of money, economy was booming, urban centers were booming, they tried to catch up and make a point of living in matching Vienna, and in some ways trying to even outdo it in its architecture and culture. So
Yeah,
lots to see and experience.
Lots of beautiful buildings from around that time, the turn of the 20th century in Budapest. Also, again, a very, very classy culture. I think of cafe culture when I think of these places.
Indeed. Cafes are very important. So the times when these cities were booming, times of quite poor quality housing and a growing cultural elite. Coffee houses became places where people hung out, sometimes a whole day, caught up on the latest gossip, read the journals, listened to music, became places of encounter and anything from poetry movements down to revolutions were born in places like the ones here on the photo, the New York Cafe in Budapest.
Lots of great grand cafes in these places. This one I really enjoy is an outdoor cafe. It happens to be facing the Opera House of Budapest. And so that's another example of the high culture in this part of the world.
Indeed, and a lot of the big cities from Vienna, Budapest, and so on still have preserved a lot of that. Of course, the modern day cafe culture with the change in life has trickled down, is a little bit different. It still preserves the importance in its social aspect. Another important thing here, the gorgeous Opera House of Budapest in this image is another good example of how music and appreciation of arts in general, but music in particular, were very important back in those days and still are today. So you can learn about the rich history and the grandeur of those imperial days gone by still today by visiting the many concerts in these beautiful cities. You can still find it in the ball season, like in Vienna. Most people are familiar just with the Viennese Opera Ball, but it's part of a much bigger ball season that you would find also in Prague. Dancing lessons for school kids, very formal ballroom dancing, concerts. Children from an early age are introduced to opera, to classical music as part of their school curriculum, going to these venues, and many times continuing throughout their life with heavily subsidized tickets and lots of opportunities that are not reserved just to locals, of course, but are there for visitors to enjoy as well.
Yeah, I would say one of the great sort of classical music destinations in Europe are a lot of these cities, especially of Central and Eastern Europe.
For sure, and very
Changing
good
gears.
value as
Oh,
well.
sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
I would also add very good value as well, as many times some of these grand venues will cost just a fraction of what they would maybe in some more established Western European destination.
That's right. So changing gears from high culture to sort of the beauty of the earth, another thing that I associate with this region when we were brainstorming, natural beauty. There's some incredible natural wonders, some beautiful landscapes in this area. Tell us a little bit about some of the natural beauty of Central and Eastern Europe.
Indeed, as you mentioned, diversity is key for this region. So it's not just cities and grand culture and architecture, it's also the natural beauty. And this is something that a lot of people tend to treasure and take away the most. Here is a scene from Hvar Island in Croatia, so just further south down the coast from where I'm right now. So the beautiful myriad of islands, Venetian heritage that the Eastern Adriatic coast bears with its beautiful sea, gorgeous historical towns, but also other natural sites. Oh, Dubrovnik, definitely one that never disappoints, the Pearl of the Adriatic, as it's often nicknamed, or also famous as the King's Landing, I guess, digitally enhanced, of course, for the TV series. But beyond that, it's also inland as well, forests, mountains, Plitvice lakes. One of the natural sites that tends to be one of the biggest wow moments and discoveries for a lot of travelers in this region. There are many like this, but this one is the most known and the easiest one to visit, where there are 16 lakes interconnected with waterfalls. Created an incredible fairy tale-like environment through which you hike on these boardwalks, like you see in these images. And around every corner, there's another set of waterfalls and lakes. And it's just an incredible natural experience that I don't think anybody is left indifferent after seeing it.
And I should emphasize, Marijan, this is such a great experience, the Plitvice Lakes National Park. We have it on 2 of our tours. It's actually the only stop that's fully replicated on 2 tours. The Central Europe tour and the Adriatic tour both go to this place because it's so special.
True. And I do both of those itineraries, and I've never once in all the years had anyone say, oh no, we're going there again. So everybody always particularly looks forward to seeing it again. So nobody minds the repetition for sure.
And then we also have mountains.
Yes, indeed. So Slovenia, in this case, Lake Bohinj, it is one of the 8 alpine countries. With its stunning scenery, of course, in United Europe, but those mountains actually in the distance, you can already see towards the border with Austria, where you can, through the system of hiking trails and mountain huts, you could essentially hike through various different countries, beautiful locations, mountain lakes and hidden waterfalls. Tiny alpine villages, dairy farming, highlands, and so on. So harboring many different gems, like in this image, Lake Bled. And I've seen it in recent years throughout the world, in many cases, as screensavers and so on. And often people don't even know where it is. So now you know it is in Slovenia, in just in the foot of the Alps, close to the Karavanke and Julian Alps ranges. And one of the most recognizable gems. So many of the hiking trails, especially around some of the mountain passes like Vršić Pass, Predil, and so on, which you can also by car get closer to these starting position for many of these beautiful sites to explore. That even this time of the year, still be covered in snow, and yet just within easy reach of the Adriatic, again emphasizing this variety of landscapes. So the Slovenia, main country that I call home, has precisely that, where in a single hour you can go from those beautiful alpine vistas, gorgeous rivers, all the way down to the Adriatic Sea, with a whole range of microclimates, change in vegetation, landscapes, along very short driving distances. So exploring this area can be quite rewarding in that sense, indeed, if you're a fan of nature.
And I should emphasize, a lot of what we just looked at is really in Croatia, Slovenia, in the southern part of this area, really highlights of the Adriatic tour, although our Best of Central Europe tour also touches on this. But if you're doing the Best of Central Europe tour, there are also other parts of this region that are very beautiful. For example, Marijan.
Oh, like the Tatra Mountains. So people often forget that it's not just the Alps in Europe. There are other alpine ranges as well, and the Tatra Mountains definitely don't fall short of the beauty of the Alps. So we pass through the Tatras, also in our Best of Central Europe tour now as well. So there's much more than people expect. And as you mentioned, that tour in particular, the Best of Central Europe, it has an even bigger variety in landscapes and features than any other. And I just love that dynamic and playfulness between the grand cities and nature in its second half, with all these different gems that people don't really expect to see.
Right. This is the Czech Republic, for example, beautiful rolling hills and a wide variety. Let's talk about the food in this region. Marijan, what would be your overview to tell people what to expect in terms of what they're going to eat while they're on these tours?
Well, Central European food does tend to get a bad reputation, where a lot of people tend to think, oh, it's all just about pork and potatoes and the occasional dumpling falling in. But I must say there is much more to it than people think. Particularly, I would summon it up as soul food. There's so many wonderful flavors to try, from Poland all the way down to Slovenia and Croatia in this region. So indeed, going from pork and potatoes, but presented in a very tasty way, with much more to it than people expect, from various different sausages and meats. Particularly tasty. And of course, as you travel down south, with the variations also in drinks, shifting with the emphasis on beer, especially when we speak about the Czech Republic. Mustn't forget that that's the cradle of one of the cradles of beer making in Europe. The emphasis shifts as you go south to wine, and of course the cuisine changes accordingly. There's more variations, various different vegetables coming to the south, and towards the Adriatic you get more fish and Mediterranean flavors, pasta, salads. So everything mixes together. Add some wonderful spice and paprika there in Hungary, and wonderful desserts. Mix it all up, and there's something for absolutely every flavor out there. This is one
Agreed.
of the
Yeah, we'll talk more about
richest.
some of. Oh, sorry. We'll talk more about some of the details, but I think just you're exactly right. I'd say there's a lot of variety, a lot of diversity, and I think your exact comfort food, soul food is a great way to say it. Comfort food. This is very filling, satisfying, tasty food. You know, we also we're going to talk a little more about the food, but first I want to mention we always try to integrate food into our tours in interesting ways. And one of our favorite experiences on any of our tours is a cooking class that we do on our new, relatively new Best of Poland in 10 Days tour, and that's in Krakow. And what people love about this particular cooking class are a couple of things. One, we actually start in the market. We go to the farmer's market to buy the supplies. We actually teach you how to ask for the supplies in Polish, which is also a fun kind of language learning exercise. But then we don't go to a classroom or a restaurant. We go to local homes. We split up into small groups, and we actually go into local homes, and people who grew up eating this food get to teach you how to make pierogi, which are these little kind of dumplings that Marijan alluded to, traditional handmade dumplings. And they teach you how to make pierogi just the way babcia used to make. And it's a wonderful experience because people just are so excited to share this part of their culture. And everyone gets into this process of making the filling and making the dough and hand crimping the corners of the dough. And everyone's always very, very proud and very eager to eat the results. And so I think we try to do these kinds of experiences on a lot of our tours. And I think this one that we do on our Poland tour is a real hit. But getting back to food more generally, Marijan, let's talk about some of the regional variations you alluded to. So for example, yes, the baseline is kind of pork and potatoes maybe, but there's more variety, I think, than people expect. So for example, this is from Hungary. Tell us a little about Hungarian food, which for a lot of folks is like a high watermark.
So as you start heading down south, Hungary already has quite a mild climate, so that allows for a strong presence of for a big wine growing culture. Also, Hungary is in a very fertile area with a very fertile lands that allow the cultivation of many different vegetables. And among them, definitely the prime spot is taken by paprika, so bell peppers. There are more than 40 different varieties. People are usually familiar more with just paprika as the spice, sweet or spicy, but of course it comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and how it's integrated into the culinary delights of traditional Hungarian food. So goulash, a dish that many people are familiar with, at least by name, comes in different variations precisely because it became so popular in the Austro-Hungarian Empire and had different versions of it throughout it. But originally it is a Hungarian dish, literally means the shepherd's soup. And of course, it can't miss a pinch of paprika in there, some wonderful vegetables, and of course the beef broth. So it is actually a soup in its original form, not necessarily a stew like the Bohemian or Austrian variations. And it's a good reflection on how tasty, how hearty the Hungarian cuisine is as well. But Hungarian cuisine is not just about traditional flavors. They tend to use also a lot of different meats, and not just pork, beef, chicken. They go into a lot of game and duck and goose liver being one of the prime, most cherished items on the Hungarian menus. But it's not just about old style cooking and with buckets of lards and things like that brought the Hungarians the reputation at one point even of being the nation with the highest rate of coronary diseases, enjoying all those delicious recipes. But rather, it is very flexible. So especially in urban environments like its capital, Budapest, you can experience a wonderful fusion with modern flavors from other world cuisines, integrating the best aspects of the traditional Hungarian cuisine with other cuisines and flavors, reinterpreting them in a more modern way, the way that that we like to enjoy them today. So when you go to a place like Budapest in particular, there's such a variety of restaurants, and each chef becomes an artist, let's say, that is bring out the best with those combinations.
And Marijan, let me interrupt you to say I totally agree. I think people think it's going to be traditional food. I consider myself a foodie. I like modern international fusion cuisines. And I got to say, Central Europe is an amazing destination for food if you like modern food. Places like Budapest, places like Warsaw, places like where you live, Ljubljana, Slovenia. Some of the best food cities in Europe, as far as I'm concerned, both for the traditional flavors, but also for these kind of modern variations that you're describing. And then as we head south, the cuisine changes quite a bit again, doesn't it?
Exactly. So the closer you get to the sea, again, the base is still more shifting away from wine, shifting away from beer, going towards wines. And of course, as we see here, a typical dish, let's say in down in the Dalmatian coastal areas of Croatia, with grilled fish, potatoes with Swiss chards, lots of salads. Mediterranean flavors. That again are quite different and adding a whole new segment to, let's say, this Central European octopus salad. A lot of people tend to scare away. It sounds strange if they haven't tried it yet, but it's absolutely delicious. It should not be chewy or tasting strange. If it's done well, it's a delightful culinary surprise indeed. So seafood, once you get down to the Adriatic, is definitely the staple and the base of things. Of course, wine growing culture. People are often surprised how many different wines and how high of a quality one can encounter throughout this region, especially so the southern portions, of course, of Central Europe. And once again, what good value they can be, and exploring beyond the wines that French and Italian wines that most people are familiar with, at least to some extent, can open up a whole new, let's say, culinary segment and to whole new culinary experiences. But of course, the upper part of Central Europe, it's still beer-based, particularly the Czech Republic, again, where beer making has a lot of the beer making traditions in the world have its origins from the original Budweiser and many numerous wonderful beers and microbrews today. Beer is particularly good quality and tasty as well. So for beer lovers and wine lovers, there's always something there. But in addition to beer and wine, one can enjoy, of course, somewhat stronger drinks. Like here, I believe with Peter, we have bison grass Dubrovka, bison grass vodka. So it's flavored with these herbs that give it a distinct, slightly yellowish color. Locals like to joke that it's because the bison's pee in it, but let me assure you that's not the case. It mixes particularly well with apple juice, and it's one of a number of different vodka varieties up in the north, of course, where beer and wine were not as common. Indeed, it would be areas where arguably vodka making started. But as you go further down south, each country has its own fire water, so to speak, usually based on distilled various different fruits that are typical for the area. So they can vary from plum to cherry, maybe adding honey or different herbs. So yeah, each region has its own and, represent another aspect of exploring the local culture.
Excellent. Well, changing gears again, in brainstorming what's special about this region, another thing that occurred to us, Marijan, was the Jewish heritage here. The Central Europe is maybe the best part of Europe to learn a little bit about the Jewish heritage. So tell us a little bit about some of the sites that you might see related to that while traveling here.
Indeed, prior to World War II, the cities of Central Europe, particularly Poland, In fact, were home to the majority of the world's Jewish population. Of course, all of that changed with World War II. That made a very sharp incision, particularly in the urban centers, where the Jewish population always made a key cultural fiber of these cities. And overnight, literally, this cultural fiber was taken out of them. Of course, we can still see the heritage in the synagogues, in the architecture, in some of the food that trickled down into the traditional food of these places. We can visit the beautiful synagogues as an example of what the Reformed synagogues in Prague, where a lot of the Jewish population at the end of the early 1900s was fully integrated with the general population. And in urban centers like Prague, for instance, represented ironically actually the key pillar of Germanic culture. And it was precisely the Nazis then that, again, completely erased that from these cities. And in some places, there's a comeback of Jewish culture as well, but of course, nowhere in the numbers that it was before. Beautiful historical sites like the cemetery, Jewish cemetery in Prague, synagogue in Budapest, the world's second largest synagogue, I believe, after New York. Again, another beautiful example of this new neo-Moorish style that was being adopted in the architecture of synagogues, especially in the late 1800s, early 1900s, making for some remarkable sites to visit and very pleasing both architecturally, artistically, but also for the sad story and the history that usually these sites convey to the visitor.
Right. And, you know, as you alluded to, Marijan, Poland was one of the places that had the highest concentration of Jewish people. And, you know, under communism, a lot of that heritage was kind of brushed aside and was kind of went into hiding. And it's really been rejuvenated a lot lately. So, for example, here in Poland, in Krakow, there's a neighborhood called Kazimierz, which is a good example of sort of the reflourishing of Jewish culture with synagogues and so forth.
Syndika Zimierz was in particular used for a lot of scenes in the famous movie Schindler's List. And it has seen, as a result of that, even more of an influx of visitors in attention and comeback in Jewish culture, both from restaurants, festivals, cultural events, and so forth.
Yeah, very important part of the history here. And I will say, again, on the Best of Poland tour, we really wanted to include a stop at what I think is sort of the definitive museum of Jewish culture, I would say anywhere in Europe. And that is the Museum of Polish Jews, or Polin, in Warsaw. An absolutely wonderful, fairly recently opened state-of-the-art museum that traces the whole rich, beautiful heritage of Jewish people in Central Europe in general, but specifically here in Poland. It's really a moving sight to see, and we take our groups there with a guided tour as well. Well, as Marijan alluded to, the tragic end of that Jewish population was only one aspect of a very tumultuous 20th century. So another one of the kind of the themes, I think, of traveling here, especially for a thoughtful traveler, a student of history, someone who's really curious about the whole story of a place, is everything that this region went through throughout the 20th century, from World War II to the Holocaust to the communism to the end of communism. So, Marijan, let's talk a little bit about that recent, I say recent, the last 100 years or so of history in this part of the world. I think that's, for a lot of folks, that's kind of the most interesting chapter of the 20th century. Starting with what you've already alluded to, this was the place where the Nazis carried out a lot of the worst atrocities of the Holocaust.
Indeed, the 20th century was not particularly kind to the areas of Central Europe, and it went from bad to worse many times. In the course of World War II, of course, this was the center of the Holocaust, with many of the extermination and death camps, with Auschwitz being the most notorious one, where more than 1 million, well over 1 million people lost their lives. We also visit on the Best of Central Europe tour the Auschwitz concentration camp memorial site. and getting in touch with the Jewish heritage and history is also a very important part of our tours going through this region. Auschwitz is a particularly difficult and emotional site for many, but a very important one indeed to visit.
I agree, Marijan.
Uh,
I'm sort of retired now, but I used to lead these tours, and I know how powerful and important this site is for so many of the people who are able to go there with us. It's so important to us as part of our teaching mission to expose people to this story and the documentation, the very meticulous documentation that sites like this have done to make sure people understand what happened here. Well, then in the scope of history, you go from sort of the Nazi frying pan into the communist fire, right? There was this double whammy in a lot of these countries where you went from the horrors of World War II, immediately began the communist period. So tell us a little bit about how that is reflected
Sure,
in here.
for the horrors of World War II were not the end of bad times, unfortunately, for most of these countries, as their destiny was unfortunately decided by others, depending on how quickly, particularly in this case, the Soviet armies moved into this part of Europe. And of course, soon the Iron Curtain descended on Europe, and a lot of these countries became Soviet satellites, not necessarily by their choice, and started a whole new period in their history. For several decades, the period of communism, which today can sometimes seem quite surreal with some of the sites that one can visit, memorials and museums. Almost every city that you visit has a communist museum as well. This image is from the House of Terror. I think the name itself says it all, as the same building was used by the proto-fascist Arrow Cross movement, and once again, after World War II, by the communist secret police. And indeed, a lot of terror and horrible things were going on in that exact building, which is today the museum, trying to present some of those events and what was going on in quite a modern and striking exhibition. So they usually make a very worthwhile site to visit, as well as it again addresses a very important chapter of 20th century history for these countries.
Yeah, and that's the House of Terror in Budapest, Hungary. But like Marijan said, every city has their own sort of version of this. So if you're intrigued by this part of the history, sometimes it's included on the tour, but very often it's a great thing to do on your free time to kind of to dig into that. And we also want to help people kind of understand what it was like to live during communism, to go to some of these planned worker towns. So Marijan, tell us about this place.
This is the area of Nova Huta, a communist fantasy that was built just outside of Kraków, with these big housing projects, of course, with factories that would provide work for the workers. And it's a perfect example what the communist society would have represented. And walking through the streets, of course, it's still a living part of the town, being repurposed in the modern way. And yes, in some of our tours, we also go through Nova Huta, and others you have the opportunity to do this on your own. And it's just fascinating to see it firsthand, the buildings, how people lived, what they did, what the daily life basically in a place like that would have been. Because again, even though it is fairly recent history, it seems again already quite old for the younger generations, while there are still around the older generations that seem to be stuck in a way, still having a hard time, let's say, adapting to the new systems, and still kind of, you might be surprised, even fantasizing about the good old days when places like Nova Huta were at their prime. So it's wonderful, especially finding it out still firsthand from locals, both the ones that experience and the new generations, how they see it in retrospect, what their parents or grandparents lived through.
And speaking as an American, Marijan, who had a very different upbringing than this, I would say a particularly exciting aspect of going on a tour to a place like this is you get local people who lived under this time. So a lot of our guides are about the age of Marian and I, which means they grew up under communism. This is Tomasz and Monika, two of our outstanding guides for our Best of Poland tour. And when that tour goes to this Nowa Huta neighborhood for a guided tour, they don't just show you the sights and explain what it was like, but they can tell you their personal stories about what it was like. And I think for a lot of our American tour members, that's a very powerful thing that they'll always remember, hearing what Monika telling her stories of what it was like growing up in a building like one of these, and some of the traditions they had that were similar to today and some things that were very, very different from today. So I think I wouldn't underestimate that. If you're intrigued by this region, just the power of going to these places and hearing firsthand experiences from people who lived through this time that really, now it kind of feels like ancient history, but it really wasn't that long ago. It was still within many of our lifetimes. I will also say, for me personally, oh, sorry, go ahead, Marijan.
No, I just wanted to say, through the personal experiences of locals, one can realize there was much more than just hardship in communism, and why there would be people that would be nostalgic of those times. So there is much more, and yes, especially hearing it from local people is a very rewarding experience while it's still possible, of course.
So that's very well said, Maria. And I think a lot of American travelers to this area find some of their assumptions are confronted and challenged a little bit. They have an idea of what they think communism was, but actually when you hear about people living through it, you realize, well, there was some oppression and some struggle. There were also some aspects of it that people would be nostalgic for quite reasonably. Another chapter of this, I'll just mention again, our Best of Poland tour, we get to go up to Gdańsk, which is a city on the north coast of Poland. And here we really learn about the story of the end of communism, which you could make a case actually began the beginning of the end was right here in Gdańsk. You might remember Lech Wałęsa was a shipyard electrician who staged the Solidarity strikes in 1989. And it's really just gives you goosebumps to go to the actual shipyards where this happened, to see this beautiful new museum that you see in the background there and learn all about it, and actually to stand at that gate where all of these striking shipyard workers would come to communicate with their families nervously waiting outside, and learn about this amazing moment that was sort of the beginning of the end of communism in this part of Europe. Now, Marijan, you're from a different part of Central Europe. Again, there's more variety here than people might expect. So you're Slovenian with some Croatian roots as well, which were parts of Yugoslavia, which had a pretty different experience than Poland or Hungary or Czechoslovakia, for example. Tell us a little bit about, especially on the Adriatic tour, how you would handle this differently, or how that experience was different for you.
True. Communism, the history, the part of the communist period, of course, is a very important one for Yugoslavia in its post-World War II period, but it's quite a different story. In the sense that Yugoslavia was a communist country, but it was not behind the Iron Curtain, was not a Soviet satellite. So it soon after World War II, because the ideas of its leader, Josip Broz Tito, he didn't see eye to eye with Stalin and what communism should be. So there was a big fallout with the Soviet Union right after World War II. And while remaining communist, Yugoslavia largely turned itself to the West for support. So it was a strange society, neither free like the West, but not as oppressive as the East. And it doesn't quite fit into the black and white Cold War narrative. So it's much more complicated and makes it much more interesting to see what kind of background Yugoslavia and what kind of history it read through itself as it became one of the founding members of the non-aligned group of nations. So it's a whole different story yet again.
And then another, I think, really powerful aspect of that story that people who travel here find very moving and very interesting is, of course, the other thing different about Yugoslavia is the breakup of Yugoslavia at the end of communism came with quite a lot of violence in certain places and some warfare. So I know that that's another aspect of the tour, both the Central Europe tour and the Adriatic tour. We have moments where we can kind of learn more about that story. Do you want to say anything about that, Marijan?
Sure. Well, at the same time, for most of the previously mentioned countries, the fall of communism was the big shock and the change in the economy. Here, that was not so much the case, as this area always saw a mix of planned and market economy. The big shock and the big trauma for this region was its breakup, and in some of its segments resulting in a very bloody conflict. There were actually several different conflicts and different timelines and for different issues in different regions that led to the breakup of this country that used to be 6 federal units. Now there are 7 independent countries in this same area, and with some of the biggest hardship being suffered, particularly like we can see this monument in Croatia to the fallen Croatian soldiers in one of the villages that we drive through. Even bigger trauma in Bosnia, where hundreds of thousands of people were killed in the ethnic violence. A lot of the issues going back a long time having to do with issues and conflicts that started during World War II that were just simply bottled up during the communist period under Tito, or at least, let's say, put beyond discussion. And then once the lid was taken off in the 1990s, of course, just continued where they left off in 45, and resulting in scenes that Europe never thought of seeing again after World War II, with all the horrors being repeated in every gruesome detail, unfortunately. So that's also a very important part of our tours that go through Croatia. On the Adriatic tour, we do also a brief side trip for a couple of days to into Bosnia. It's southern part of Herzegovina, and learning about the issues and still, even now, 30 years later, the challenges that are a result of these conflicts in some places today are another very important segment on our tours as well.
Very well said. Yeah, I mean, this is a part of the world that has gone through an awful lot in the last century or so, and it's still going through it. I wanted to mention briefly, this is a part of the world that's also quite close to Ukraine, where there's an ongoing conflict. A war has been going on now for 3 years. And it's an interesting issue. When this first happened, I mean, Poland and Hungary both share borders with Ukraine. And I think for a while at the beginning, a lot of American travelers were wary about going here. Of course, we gave it a very careful look. We were in contact with our contacts on the ground. We felt very confident it was an absolutely safe thing to do, to continue to take our groups there. And we do continue to take our groups there and have had absolutely no concerns or incident or troubles or worries whatsoever. Marijan, is it safe to say, as someone guiding our tours in this region, that Ukraine should not be of a matter of concern for someone considering traveling here?
Exactly. It definitely shouldn't be a matter of concern. It may look close on a map, but if there would be, let's say, an escalation in a conflict to a next level, it wouldn't matter whether you are 10 miles from the border or 1,000 miles. So hopefully that will not happen. But traveling to these places this time is definitely by no means any concern. I would just like to say that learning about the conflicts in the past and the tumultuous 20th century history, from World War II to the ethnic conflicts in Yugoslavia, breakups, and so on, this is one very important segment. So learning from the past. So learning from these things, it's easier to understand also current history, which is in the making. And that's the whole point of our learning, so to speak. And it makes it also somewhat easier to understand some things that are happening currently, like Ukraine and some other potential conflicts.
Yeah, Marijan, that is so well said. I mean, we really believe in thoughtful travel. If you learn about the history, you'll understand the present and the future. And I would actually go so far as to say, not only do we not have any safety concerns about what's going on in Ukraine, but we look for opportunities to enhance people's understanding and learning about it. So, for example, on our Poland tour, we stay at a wonderful hotel in Warsaw, where the owner of the hotel makes a point of hiring Ukrainian refugees, Ukrainian immigrants into positions in his hotel. And we were having a traditional Polish dinner there. And the first night we were going to do it, we said, "Now hold on a second, you're making us Polish food, but your chefs are Ukrainians." He said, "Well, that's right." I said, well, wouldn't they like to cook us traditional Ukrainian food? So this has become a mainstay of our Best of Poland tour. When we have this evening in Warsaw, we have a beautiful feast of Ukrainian foods that was prepared by a Ukrainian staff. And you really feel the way that Poland has embraced, and a lot of these countries have embraced these Ukrainian refugees and immigrants and taken them in and integrated them into society. They even have a musician come and play a traditional Ukrainian instrument. And so it's a really interesting aspect of something that might seem initially intimidating or worrisome actually becomes a very powerful part of the experience of traveling somewhere. Marijan, let's wrap up this section. In a moment, we're going to kind of go through all of our itineraries so you understand how this all fits together. But we're going to finish up this section by just talking about, we thought, well, what's the catch-all, right? What are the things we haven't talked about yet? And this is sort of some of our favorite, those wow moments that Emily was talking about earlier. What are some unique experiences you can have in this area? So why don't you go ahead and get us started with this one?
Sure. Many times, some of the greatest wow moments are the kind that people don't expect and don't originally book the tours for or start traveling through these areas. So here in this photo is a particularly good example of the baths, one of the bath complexes in Budapest. Much of Hungary, and Budapest in particular, is built on this vast reservoirs of hot water, so lots of hot springs that you can enjoy in the baths of every town. This is one that we particularly like to recommend to our travelers, the Széchenyi baths, the biggest ones, very traditional and opulent, with dozens of pools with different temperatures and saunas and facilities that one can enjoy. And sure, they can feel quite touristy sometimes, as I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, it's mainly tourists. But as you can see in this image with the guys playing chess, they're not tourists. You'll be rubbing elbows with other locals, some of them on a prescription from their doctor, as it's part of the local medical system as well. And it can be very very enjoyable and very local experience as well, as you make it such. And nowadays it's much easier to experience than maybe in the past. I remember many years ago when we used to go to these places, they used to be much more intimidating. There was no English, and the old systems, how you would get in. That's not the case anymore. It's much more user-friendly. And definitely a wonderful thing to experience. And of course, there's quite a big variety. Here we have the images from the Gellert baths, another beautiful bath complex along the Danube in Budapest. These tend to be, they are part of a famous five-star hotel, the Gellert, and a much more upscale experience in many ways, with this beautiful Art Nouveau architecture that graces the interiors of the baths. So there are many different bath complexes, and just like the locals have their favorite ones and different ones they like to go to, the travelers can choose depending on their preferences as well.
Wonderful. I'll share one of my favorite moments. Again, this is from our Poland tour. Poland is very connected to the composer Frédéric Chopin. You might think of him as French, but he's actually born in Warsaw and has Polish roots. And the Poles are very, very proud of Chopin. In fact, they say they love this quote where Chopin once said, the sound of his music to him was the sound of the wind blowing through the willow trees in his native land, Poland. And so this is a very important part of Polish culture. And when we're in Warsaw on our Best of Poland tour, you have the opportunity on your free afternoon, if you want to, every Sunday afternoon through the summer, they do these amazing Chopin in the Park concerts where you can go with hundreds, thousands of local people to just listen to a very talented musician play the songs of Chopin in this beautiful park. We also include in our tours this hotel I mentioned that does the Ukrainian dinner. They also host very intimate drawing room concerts of Chopin music. So that's something else. If you like classical music, if you like Chopin, this Warsaw stop is something that's really a highlight for a lot of folks. Marijan, another thing that I think is a kind of a wow moment, especially on our Adriatic tour, but also for the Rovinj stop on our Central Europe tour, is where you are right now, swimming in the Adriatic, right?
That's right. That's what I have just outside my window now. Of course, it's dark, so there isn't much to see, but this is what it looks like during the day. A lot of people are familiar with the image of Dubrovnik, is probably the most famous site down the eastern Adriatic coast, but there are many, many other towns just like it with beautiful, this is in fact Rob, where I'm right now, and swimming in the Adriatic is one of the most fun experiences, particularly in the summer months. So the swimming season is starting just now as the temperatures started picking up. And you have these beautiful towns like Rob that can look back at 2,000 or 3,000 years of continuous urban history, frozen in these beautiful historical limestone structures, and providing the backdrop is, of course, the beautiful turquoise, blue and crystal clear Adriatic Sea. In terms of the quality of water, it is one of the cleanest parts of the entire Mediterranean area. That has a lot to do the way that water currents and so on work in the Mediterranean, providing this wonderful backdrop and prime quality for water sports, swimming, or anything else that your heart desires.
Wonderful. I wish I could, like you, I wish I could go hop in the Adriatic tomorrow morning when the sun comes up. And then the last example of these kind of wow moments, one thing I love about this region is sometimes it's not the big amazing sights and the fancy opera houses and the famous museums and the beautiful churches. It's these wonderful little details of the culture that you're not quite expecting that sort of catch you off guard and give you a real insight into a place. So Marijan, you're from Slovenia, and I know beekeeping is a really big deal in Slovenia. So tell us just a little bit about, you don't go to Central Europe to learn about beekeeping, but it might be the thing you remember the most vividly. So just tell us a little bit about Slovenia's beekeeping heritage.
Exactly. It's something that people wouldn't never think about or expect, but beekeeping is a big deal in Slovenia. That's in fact where in the 1700s Anton Janša was born, probably not a name that rings a bell, but he is considered the father of modern day beekeeping. So the way that bees are raised, beehives work, and so on, it all goes back to him in modern day and present day Slovenia. Anything connected with bees, not just honey, going down to beeswax, honey brandy, any honey related things is very, very Slovenian. And the tradition is not just in the past in its origins, but continues today. For instance, the city where I live, Ljubljana, urban beekeeping is a big thing. You can rent a beehive from the city. A lot of the public buildings would have beehives on their roofs, as bees seem to absolutely love the urban environment. In the countryside, you have bee or api wellness and all sorts of new variations of it. And a very typically Slovenian thing, for instance, very typical souvenir, are these wonderful beehive panels. And you can see some modern day versions of these in the front of this beehive, particularly the ones from the 1800s would have intricately painted motifs with patron saints down to various different anecdotes, stories, and fairy tales painted on them, and present a big chunk of Slovenian heritage still today.
Thank you for explaining. Yeah, this is just one example. Every country of the region we're talking about has wonderful little details like this. In Slovenia, it's beekeeping, and other places it's something else. And that's what I love about traveling to these places and really unpacking those little cultural tidbits. Okay, we're gonna thank you, Marijan, for giving us that sort of tour guiding sample. We're going to get now a little bit more into the specific tour itineraries for each of these places. You might be intrigued by all of this. We're going to help you weave it all together and understand how all these places fit into our itineraries. But first, you probably, if you're watching this, you probably already are familiar with our travel style, especially if this is not your first travel festival session. But rather than get into all the details, because I think you all probably know what this is about, I'm just curious from Marijan's point of view, as a Rick Steves tour guide, what is an aspect or some aspects of our tours that you particularly appreciate as a tour guide?
Oh, I think our tour requirements are very clear, how they're marketed in the sales material, the expectations in terms of the activity levels, how the travel is going to be done, very low key. For a lot of travelers, it tends to be quite discouraging having to carry your own luggage, walking upstairs and doing all these various things and learning and so forth. But I must say that the aspect that I enjoy the most with all of these requirements is the kind of people that take these tours. They make for the best travel companion. They're some of the most well-traveled, smart, educated, interesting people you will meet out there. And that, particularly for me as a tour guide, makes it the thing that I enjoy the most. And for people who take these tours, yes, enjoying the company of each other. And often Rick Steves tours tend to be nicknamed the tours with no grumps. And indeed, the way that it works, it really is that way. It's like traveling with your best friend that you haven't met yet.
Wow, Marijan, that's such a beautiful statement and such a strong endorsement of the wonderful travelers we attract. I agree totally from my experience on tours as well. That we just attract the coolest people on our tours. We're so lucky to travel with them. If you do want to learn more about what's special about our tours, or if you're still trying to figure out how it all works, if you've been following our festival, early last week we did a Tours 101 session. As a follow-up on May 8th, we're going to do this again. So if you've now kind of seen some of your tour choices and you still have questions, be sure to sign up for our May 8th Tours 101 session to get the full story. Okay, now we're going to run through these itineraries, see how all this fits together for these Central and Eastern Europe tours, okay? We have several tours in this region. Each one kind of has a different niche, a different specialty. So we're going to help you visualize sort of what you do on each one. Marijan will offer a little color commentary as I sort of narrate the routes here. So the best of Central Europe, Prague to Slovenia in 15-day tours. That's your survey tour. That's your grand tour. That's your sampler, okay? We're going to we spend the night in 5 different countries. We drive through a 6th country, Slovakia. So you're seeing a lot of this region, a few longer bus days, and then really digging into some great cities. If you want to just get a taste of everything that we just showed you, not everything, but the highlights, this is the one to consider. We start off with a couple nights in Prague. We head to Krakow in Poland with a side trip to Auschwitz, Birkenau concentration camp memorial. Spend a night in a beautiful small town in Hungary called Eger. We have 3 nights in Budapest to really dig into that great city. And then the last part of the tour, we head into Croatian Slovenia, and that's where we really get into some nature, some countryside, some smaller towns, the Plitvice Lakes National Park, those waterfalls we talked about, the beautiful coastal town of Rovinj in the Croatian coast, and of course, Lake Bled in the Slovenian mountains. So I'll just give you a few pictures to visualize what this tour is all about. Again, the 3 great cities, Prague, Krakow, and Budapest. You also have some very important side trips and other attractions. The Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, we do a really serious job of having a local guide to really explain the story of this important site. We also have a night in Eger, Hungary, a beautiful small town in the heart of one of the Hungarian wine growing regions. And then that last part of the tour, again, is sort of all about nature, beautiful lakes and waterfalls of Plitvice Lakes National Park. We spend 2 nights in Rovinj, which is a beautiful coastal town. This is your vacation from your vacation day. You can swim in the Adriatic if the weather's good. You can enjoy exploring this beautiful kind of almost Italian style small Croatian town. And then we finish up in the Alps of Slovenia at Lake Bled. Okay, that's the best of Central Europe in 15 days tour. Prague to Slovenia. Marijan, as someone who guides most of these tours, do you have any wisdom about what the pros and cons are of this tour, or what this tour would be for somebody?
Like you said, it has a wonderful cross-section of all these various different things and features all the great variety we talked about over the last hour. So if wants to experience and sample this variety, this is definitely the best tour. And it starts off with these gorgeous grand cities from fairy tale Prague to Krakow that a lot of people don't expect much but tend to fall in love with, beautiful imperial opulence of Budapest and so forth. And then with all these major urban highlights, it tends to slow down once you tire in the second half as it winds down towards the Adriatic and the Alps, and the focus shifts more on nature. And gives you a chance to take it all in and absorb all that, and adding a whole nother dimension. So I do almost a dozen different itineraries for Rick Steves, and I must say this is one of my favorite tours for sure in terms of the variety, which is something I always enjoy when I travel.
Yep, I agree totally. That's the strong suit of this one. Okay, another option would be the best of Prague and Budapest in 8 days tour. This is a much shorter tour, about half the length. And it's really a deep dive into the two great cities of Central Europe, 3 nights in Prague, 4 nights in Budapest. You're going to do a lot of the same things you do on the Central Europe tour in terms of the main sightseeing highlights. You're going to see the great sights of Prague, for example, but we have a little bit more time to add a little bit of nuance, a little bit of texture to your trip. For example, now in Prague, we have enough time to do what we call our Velvet Revolution walk, where we go to St. Wenceslas Square and we learn about that night in November of 1989, where protests that filled this square ended up ending communism in communist Czechoslovakia. A very powerful way to learn about that communist period is something that we add for those who are doing this deeper dive into Prague and Budapest. Again, in Budapest, we're going to do all of the big sightseeing highlights that you would expect, but we have a little bit more time. We can dive into the great market hall in Budapest and really get to know the different Hungarian foods that Marijan was talking about earlier. And we also do a cooking class for this wonderful Hungarian cuisine. So that's the Prague and Budapest tour, the two great cities in about a week. Marijan, you've done this one too. Do you have any thoughts about strengths of this one?
Oh, yes. While the Best of Central Europe is a wonderful sampler tour, particularly in Prague and Budapest, as it's the grandest cities on this tour, everybody always drives away saying, oh, I wish I would have had one more day in that city. And with this tour, that's exactly what you get. And you get to sometimes even just 1 or 2 days more can make a whole difference in terms of how you experience and explore more in depth these amazing sites. And both of these places have so much that you'll definitely not run out of things to see and do. And so this is about appreciating in a more to the fullest these two beautiful cities.
Yeah, it just gives you a little more time, for example, to go to these beautiful thermal baths that Marijan was talking about, for example. All right, so those are the first two, Central Europe, Prague, Budapest. Here's another one. This is one of our newest tours. This is very close to my heart. I helped design this with some folks from our office and some of our great tour guides. We've been doing this a few years. I'd say it's one of our fastest growing tours. It's really been a huge hit. People love it. Every year we're doing more and more. We were sold out for 2025. We've just released a bunch for 2026. So now's the good time to sign up. This is our Best of Poland in 10 Days tour. On that Central Europe tour, we get to go to Krakow, which if you had to pick one place, that would be the place to go in Poland. There's so much more to Poland. And so we're really excited to have this tour that showcases this big, beautiful country. We got 2 nights at the beginning up in Gdansk, up in the northern coast of Poland, where that Solidarity history, the Lech Wałęsa stuff took place. Also just a gorgeous old historic town. We get to see Malbork Castle, Torun, which is a beautiful red brick town, is a great overnight. We have 3 nights in Warsaw to really dig into that wonderful, amazing, interesting, fascinating capital city of Poland. And then we finish up down in Krakow. Because again, even if you've done the Eastern Europe tour, the Central Europe tour, you never mind having more time in that beautiful, beautiful town of Krakow. This is just a wonderful experience. Let me just show you some pictures to help you visualize what you do on this tour. Gdansk on the northern coast of Poland is a really breathtakingly beautiful town. I think people don't expect this. Maybe if they've never heard of this town, they're really blown away by the gorgeous architecture, the old historic Hanseatic town of Gdansk. It's just a great place to kick off this tour. From there, we hop on the bus. We stop at Malbork Castle, which is the largest red brick castle on Earth. Do a tour there. And boy, our tour members adore the night that we spend in Torun, this beautiful little red brick town in northern Poland. This was the birthplace of Copernicus. It's also famous for its gingerbread. So it's a great chance to kind of have a really a sweet experience of Polish culture here in Torun. And then from there, as I said, we got 3 nights in Warsaw. So you really get to learn about the big city of Warsaw. It's a really big metropolis. It's really not just the capital of Poland. It's kind of one of the leading cities, I think, of Central Europe. It's emerging as kind of a European hub. So you have the modernity of Warsaw, but you also get to see the old town, which was rebuilt after World War II, and learn about some of that heritage. And then after Warsaw, we end up in Krakow, as I said, as Marijan alluded to. It's a place that people maybe don't know much about. And as soon as they get to this beautiful town in southern Poland, they just absolutely fall in love. It's just a wonderful itinerary, and I'm so happy we're doing it. I'm so happy it's doing so well. People are loving it. Now, Marijan, it's a new enough tour. You haven't been able to lead this tour, but I think you were telling me your wife went on the tour and enjoyed it. Tell me more about that.
That's true. She absolutely loved it, and she tells everyone if they ask which tour should I take, go to Poland. She's absolutely smitten with this tour. So I would love to, for the first chance, to see it for myself as well.
That's a great endorsement. And I should mention, Marian's wife Barbara is one of our tour guides as well, so she really knows what she's talking about if she likes a place. Okay, and now the next tour, we mentioned how the Central Europe tour ends in Croatia and Slovenia. And when we did that tour for many years, people loved that little taste they were getting of Croatia and Slovenia. And they started to say to us, boy, we would love a tour that really gets into this region more, the Eastern Adriatic region. And so, Marijan, I guess it was 15 years ago, plus maybe 20 years ago, you and me and Tina and some of our office team kind of brainstormed this Best of the Adriatic tour, which has gone on again to be one of our most successful tours. People absolutely love this Best of the Adriatic in 14 days. And as you remember from earlier when we were talking about, for example, the natural wonders of this region, most of those pictures are things you would see on this tour. So we'll start for a couple nights in Ljubljana, which is where Marijan lives. We'll head up into the Slovenian Alps. This gives you a really good look at that gorgeous mountain scenery, the high Alps of Slovenia. Then we go down to Istria, which is the northern part of Croatia, do some interesting things there. Head into Plitvice Lakes National Park, those waterfalls we keep talking about. And then from there, the last week or so of the tour is down along the famous Dalmatian coast, Split, Korčula, and Dubrovnik, three of the great towns of southern Croatia, with a side trip and an overnight in Mostar, Bosnia-Herzegovina, to give you a taste of the full variety and diversity of cultures in this part of Central Europe. Just to show you a few pictures, just to make you jealous, this is the town Marijan gets to live in, Ljubljana, the capital of Slovenia. To be honest, it's one of my favorite places in all of Europe. I just adore this town. It's got a wonderful cafe culture. It's got gorgeous architecture. It's just a beautiful place to start this tour. From there, we get a really quick look for just a few hours to see Lake Bled, and then we hop on the bus. We twist up over the mountains, some of these gorgeous cut glass alpine peaks that we talked about, and then we follow the Socha River for a gorgeous night up in the high country of Slovenia. From there, again, we head down to Istria in northern Croatia. In this case, we pay a visit to Rovinj, which is this beautiful coastal town. But instead of spending the night there, we have a lot of coastal stays later. We're going to spend the night in Motovun, it could be Motovun or a different one. There's a variety of beautiful hill towns in this part of Croatia. And so you'll stay in a hill town in the Istrian countryside, which is a very different experience than other stops in the tour. People really enjoy staying in the countryside there. And then among the things we'll do there's an olive oil tasting. We also go and see this beautiful, incredibly well-preserved ancient Roman amphitheater in the city of Pula. All of this is within a short drive of where we stay in Istria. And then again, from there, we go down south to the Dalmatian coast, the big, beautiful city of Split, with some remarkable, again, ancient Roman ruins in the core of the city of Split, and also a really beautiful contemporary kind of a buzz. It's a very modern, hip, large city. So you kind of get the combination of the history and the modernity here. We go into Bosnia-Herzegovina for a really fascinating and beautiful visit to Mostar, which is, I would say, the most accessible town of Bosnia. It's a good chance to learn a little bit about a part of this region that is predominantly Muslim, and learn about how that kind of interacts with the rest of the culture. From there, we have a little vacation from our vacation in Korčula, one of these beautiful islands of Croatia. And of course, we finish in beautiful Dubrovnik, which is the great showcase city of not just of the Dalmatian coast, but of Croatia. So, Marijan, I know you and I both love this tour as well. Tell people what would be special about the Best of the Adriatic tour.
I think the special part is the natural beauty of this area. All the cities are quite small. Ljubljana, my hometown, where we start with about 300,000 people, is by far the largest place that we stay on this tour. It's mostly smaller towns that are at the same time, though, very historical, very rewarding. So, for instance, visiting also arguably the best preserved Roman amphitheater anywhere in Europe, without the crowds of the Colosseum, or going through the city of Split with one of the most glorious urban development histories, I would say, in Europe, starting from a Roman emperor's retirement palace into a bustling Roman Mediterranean town. and ending up down in Dubrovnik, but also the rich history, like adding the part in Bosnia. I think with in such a short distance, being right there with completely different food, history, it adds a whole nother segment to the tour. So again, it is more emphasis on small towns and nature. So it's something that people particularly appreciate, especially as many North American travelers are not as familiar with the area, and again tend to be quite surprised by what is out there.
Yeah, it's a boy, it's a heck of a tour. I have to say, going through all these slides, I haven't been on most of these tours in a few years, and I'm ready to hop on the tour bus myself. These are great tours, and boy, the Adriatic tour. I mean, just if you're, I hope your eyes are popping out of your head like mine are looking at these pictures. It's just, I would say, natural beauty. Boy, I don't think we have a lot of tours that can match the best of the Adriatic tour for just natural wonders. It's really spectacular.
I must say, in
And
a few days, I'm starting one, and with your slides, I'm just looking forward to it myself.
I forgot you just finished one and you're about to start the next one, right? Yeah. You're
Yes.
having a little break between. Yeah. So the last thing I want to mention, and I'll just do this very quickly. This is not a little bit sort of tangential to the main part of what we're talking about, but this is still sort of in the Eastern European realm. And it's a really great tour, and I think one of our most underrated tours. It's just a really wonderful look, deep dive into a really fascinating country. Our Best of Bulgaria in 12 Days tour. If you're interested in this part of Europe and want to really get into some very traditional, authentic, rustic, more kind of off the beaten path culture, this is a good choice. By the way, if you've been on our Turkey tour or if you've thought about doing our Turkey tour, I would say this tour kind of feels like it's halfway between our Central Europe or Adriatic tour and our Turkey tour. It's kind of like at that cultural intersection, also in terms of sort of the cultural intimacy of it. I'll just tell you a little bit about this tour. This is the brainchild of one of our favorite tour guide colleagues, Stefan Bojadiev. Stefan is an outstanding guide. Rick and I have both loved traveling with him over the years. He has an incredible passion and knowledge of Bulgaria. I can't do it justice, but I'll just show you a few highlights. Again, you get some beautiful exposure to really traditional Slavic culture. You go to the great capital city of Sofia, Bulgaria, and see amazing Eastern Orthodox churches in that area. Bulgaria uses the Cyrillic alphabet, for example. So unlike most of the places we've talked about which use our alphabet, this is a place that feels a step kind of more exotic, more Eastern, because it's got that Eastern Orthodox faith. It's got the Cyrillic alphabet. Beautiful to go, for example, to the Rila Monastery up in the mountains and see some gorgeous frescoes. You go to the beautiful small city of Plovdiv, another one on my list of the great small cities of Central and Eastern Europe with some incredible traditional architecture and also some modern areas. We spend a little time on the Black Sea coast if you want a beach break there. And then we go to Veliko Tarnovo, which is one of the most dramatically set cities that I've ever been to. And among other things we do there, we get to meet some local craftspeople as well. This is all we have time for tonight for the Bulgaria tour. If you're intrigued by this, Gabe Gunnick, who's sort of our Monday night travel moderator extraordinaire, he did a whole hour-and-a-half presentation just on his experience of doing this Bulgaria tour. So if you're intrigued by our Bulgaria tour and you really want to deep dive into what it's all about, be sure to look this up. It was just very recent, and it's easy to find in the archive of our Monday night travel on our website. All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground here. And I think it's time for some Q&A. Emily, do you have any words for us or any thoughts from the audience?
Yes, I do. Well, first of all, thank you both so much. That was a ton of fun. And a lot of the viewers were very excited to see you both. Cameron, somebody actually at the top of the show commented that they were excited to go to Cameron Land. I thought that was pretty good. And Marijan, we have quite a few of your former tour members in the chat with us, and they're very excited to see you. So super fun night with you two. We have a couple of questions for you both, but before we get to those, I do have just a couple more slides to share with everyone. I just want to remind you all once more that we are giving away 2 city tours at the end of this festival, and it is not too late to enter to win. So 2 lucky viewers will get the chance to join us in Paris, London, Istanbul, or Rome for free. And you can enter to win using the link in the chat. And again, we only have 2 city tours to give away, but anybody can take advantage of the early booking discount. We are offering $100 off per traveler on all 2026 tour bookings from now until July 7th. But if that is just too far away, you can't wait until 2026 to travel with us. We have a number of 2025 tours on sale, and you can find a link to those in the chat as well. And on that note, I have a couple questions for the two of you. And so I am going to start with one for Marijan. And we had a number of questions from vegetarians during the show tonight. And so, Marijan, this is kind of a two-parter. I was wondering if you could tell us, first of all, how vegetarians fare on our Central and Eastern Europe tours, and if there are any, I guess, naturally vegetarian dishes that they should look out for and sample while they're traveling.
Well, I must say, years ago when we started with the first tours through this area, it was quite a challenge for vegetarians. The vegetarian option was chicken. So maybe not quite as bad, but sometimes there were some awkward and funny situations. Nowadays, all these places, if you remember from the first photo that Cameron showed, I love that photograph with the Széchenyi baths, all pitch black and dark right after the fall of communism, and all bright and beautiful now. That's kind of the transformation that a lot of these countries have gone through, and that reflects itself in the restaurant scene as well. So while maybe 10, 20 years ago it would have been a problem for vegetarians to travel, or at least a challenge, it isn't anymore. There are plenty of vegetarian restaurants. A lot of locals are vegetarian, especially countries like Czech Republic and so on have a whole food industry based on vegetarian products. And particularly once you get to the southern countries towards the Mediterranean that we introduced, with more variety in terms of salads and so forth, it certainly adds more option. Even that said, maybe in some parts of continental Central Europe, you might still find as the most common option fried cheese that you can get very quickly bored with. But if that's not your cup of tea, you just have to make it clear to the restaurant, the place you go to, and there's bound to be something else. And there's definitely more variety than there was before. So don't worry, go out there. If you're vegetarians, you won't have any problems.
Wonderful. Thank you. Cameron, I have a question for you. And I think it's pretty well established that you sort of have one of your beats here is Central and Eastern Europe. And so I am curious if there was a moment, a destination, just a particular trip you went on where you really fell for Central Europe. Anything like that?
Absolutely. And it was my first time I went there. I have a very close friend from college who was in the Peace Corps in Slovakia. And I was backpacking around mainly Germany and Austria and Switzerland. And he said, "Hey, why don't you come visit me in Slovakia?" Never thought I'd go to Slovakia. So I actually ended up meeting up with him first in Poland and Krakow. And then we did a little backpacking trip through several countries and ended up where he was living at the time in Slovakia. And so that was I never would have gone to these places, at least not on that trip, if it weren't for that. But boy, to have an excuse to go and go to Poland and go to Hungary and go to Slovakia and go to Prague, Czech Republic, really opened my eyes. And I never thought when I left on that trip that that would be my favorite part. And then when I got back, that's what had really gotten under my skin.
I just had to know what the origin story was. So thank you.
There you go.
Okay, and this is on a slightly more serious note, but we had a couple viewers in the chat today, and I also can say I've talked to some people in my other role on the customer experience team who are a little worried about traveling to Hungary right now in this political climate. And so I was wondering if you had any thoughts, either of you, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll take it in, Martin. You can add something if you'd like. It's something we think about a lot. Hungary does have Viktor Orban has been in charge of Hungary for, gosh, 14 years now, I think. And he's somebody who has really a lot of international observers are concerned. He's really eroded the tenets of open society and democracy and done some pretty aggressive things put Hungary really on the outs with the European Union. He's said very flattering things about Vladimir Putin and so forth. Um, it's an interesting question, right? I think every traveler has to make that ethical decision for themselves. Do I travel to a place where the leader of the place has politics or values that are in contradiction to my own? And I think everyone has to make that decision for themselves. I personally see a tremendous amount of value in travel and having those people-to-people connections. And by going to a place like that, you really understand it in a completely different way. And more importantly, you're connecting with the people who live there and hearing from them what their experiences of it. Of course, like in any place that's a democracy, Hungary is maybe less democratic than it used to be. But the fact is, almost as many people in Hungary don't like Orban as do like Orban. And a lot of them are concentrated in Budapest, for example, where I spend a lot of my time when I'm in Hungary. So it's interesting to imagine what Hungary must be like to have this leader. And then I go to Budapest, and most of the people I meet probably feel the same way I do, and even more strongly about the situation. I also think so. I think those people-to-people connections are still really important to me. They transcend any doubts that I have about the ethics of traveling there. And I think you can also be kind of intentional about how you spend your travel money, patronizing local businesses that do share your values within a society that's kind of drifting in a different direction. Marijan, I'm curious, as someone from a country neighboring Hungary, what have you thought about this?
Well, I think people should definitely not hold back traveling to Hungary. If safety is a concern, don't be concerned. You could travel to Hungary and enjoy all the beautiful things that you saw in the slideshow, from the baths to the food to the architecture, and be completely oblivious what is happening there politically, and you could completely ignore it. On the other hand, by traveling there, you can find out about things firsthand, like on our tours from our local guides, get your personal perspective, interacting with locals, and really see for yourself what it's all about. So again, I must stress safety is absolutely no issue with whatever you hear. And travel, again, that's the value of it. One of the wonderful things, it gives you the opportunity to learn about it firsthand.
Thank you. Thank you both. I know a lot of people are wondering about that right now. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. And I think we have time for just one more question. And I would like to end on a higher note. And so I know both of you in your different capacities return to the destinations you covered tonight again and again. And I feel a little bit like I'm asking you to pick a favorite child, but I am wondering if there is one in particular that you really, really look forward to. Do you do you have a favorite kid, basically?
I'm not just saying this because Marijan is on the call, but anytime anyone asks me, my favorite country is Slovenia. I adore Slovenia. You saw how beautiful it is. Wonderful people like Marijan and his wife Barbara and our other tour guides and so many others. Gorgeous little alpine country, extremely charming, but also very modern and forward looking. And Ljubljana, the capital, which is where Marijan is fortunate enough to live. Boy, if I could pick one place in all of Europe to hang my hat, I think it might be. Marijan, do you have a spare room that I can that I can move into?
Yes,
So
for
I'm
sure,
not sucking up to
anytime.
Marijan. That's my genuine answer. Marijan, I'm curious what you'd say about this because you're extremely well traveled.
Yes, I was worried I was afraid you're going to say exactly what you said, because my choice obviously would be my hometown and my home country, Slovenia, as well. It's just simply because it's a small place. You can drive in 2 hours across, and it has so many of the things that we talked about for this whole region in miniature, so compact in one small place. Yeah, what can I say? It's just the best. It has the best quality of life, the cultural richness, the abundance of different landscapes. Yeah, so I am partial, obviously, but for me, I can't imagine living anywhere else.
Thank you. Well, it sounds like Cameron and I are going to come stay with you in Ljubljana. Marijan, I can't wait. And just thank you both so much for this show tonight. It has been so informative and so much fun. And I know all of our viewers have really appreciated it. So thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Well, we are in the home stretch of our Festival of Tours. We have just one more show tonight, our grand finale, when Gabe Gunnick and Robin Stencil will share with us our tour members' favorite wow moments from their travels with us. So be sure to tune in for that. And also during the finale, we will be announcing the city tour giveaway winners. So if you have entered to win, you definitely want to join us tomorrow night and see who the winner was. All right. Thank you, everyone, and happy travels.